How's it going, everyone? Tommy here from Build Strong, leader of the strength and conditioning programs. And today we're going to talk about how to develop power in your training sessions. We will aim to go over 4 points. What we will cover is what is power, why would you use it for training purposes, when is power best used, and how do we actually train for power. So if there is anyone that's up to date with the physics, we can define power in a simple equation. Power equals force times velocity. So to give you a little bit more insight into that, we've got force in relation to the external resistance being moved, and the velocity is at what speed it is actually being moved. In terms of training perspective, just to give you a little bit more clarity and something that might be a little bit more relatable, from a training perspective, a 1 rep max back squat would generate really high external forces. So if you're going for a 1 rep max back squat, let's say you aim for like 2 times your body weight, you know that's going to produce really, really high levels of output force just because of the high resistance load behind it. Compare this to an empty bar squat jump. This would be more on the lower end of force because it's not as heavy, so there's not as much external object to overcome or external resistance to overcome. But on the velocity side of things, you could probably shift this a lot faster. Therefore, in a simple statement, the heavier the load, the slower the movement. If we reduce the load, we can perform the movements at greater velocities. We will talk a little bit more later in the presentation about where we might be able to use both, and is it more important to use one or the other, or both at the same time. Now, why would we use this type of training, or potentially who would use it? So from the equation mentioned earlier, we know that power equals force times velocity. So it would ultimately seem that power does play a critical role in sport and performance due to the fact that we have to produce potentially high amounts of force within really, really quick scenarios and situations. We got a few examples from sports that it may be or play a really vital role, and that's being shown to actually play a really important role in leading to increases in performance or success within that sport. So Olympic weightlifting, track and field, so sprints, short sprints, combat striking sports where really high amounts of force, due to kicks, punches, elbows, etc. Golf and a golf swing, cycling, maybe the shorter variations, but it does actually play a role in endurance, but it's a little bit off topic, but we may talk about that in the future. Or athletes with higher rates of force development, RFD being the ability to produce high amounts of force really, really quickly, has actually been shown to perform better on numerous physical tasks. In relation to these sports, Olympic weightlifting, we're trying to move a barbell from A to B as quickly as possible. Sometimes really, really heavy loads when we're talking like the elite end. Track and field, such as 100-meter sprints, probably one of the most explosive sports in the world, generating up to like 20, 25 to 30 miles per hour. Some of the top elite end athletes. Combat striking sports, the knockout forces during a kick we see in MMA or UFC, or the punches within boxing. Golf swing, some of the power generated behind that golf swing to produce really, really fast traveling golf balls. And then cycling could be the shorter events or potentially the sprint finishes that we really do call upon them higher fast twitch motor units to produce as much high amounts of force and as quickly as possible. So in relation to power being used as a training method and whereabouts we may actually use it as a training method, due to the nature that we spoke about, with power movements being largely explosive, so the ability to produce large amounts of force, this would require really, really max effort outputs. So we want max effort outputs to be readily available, and this is probably best done absent of fatigue and probably a tired state. In relation to exercise sequence or training method sequence, power movements are generally performed at the start of a session as we come out of potentially a dynamic warm-up, focused on maybe little areas that we need to mobilize, etc. At the start of the session, it's probably best to produce these high quality efforts after we've warmed our body and prepared it ready for this, because we know that we're not in a fatigued or tired state because we haven't really lifted anything heavy, produced high amounts of force repeatedly, so we might be down on maximal efforts. So generally speaking, we've talked about a little bit there, unless performed with certain training methods. Now, there is methods out there that utilize heavy resistance training followed by a plyometric or ballistic exercise just to take control of the phenomenon known as the stretch shortening cycle and also the PAP effect. This again is a little bit off topic. You could actually speak about this, but we're not going to touch on it too much. But this is basically resistance training produced high amounts of force. We basically take control of that for a short period of time and allows us to be a little bit more explosive than if we'd done the power work separately. But when an athlete is fresh due to the absence of fatigue and the ability to produce maximal intent, there was a little research behind Ben and Sale stated that the velocity specific adaptations that you gather from power trainer are ultimately determined by the effort exerted by an athlete during training. So the adaptations created from basically producing high amounts of force and producing them quickly are decided how much you get from the adaptations by the effort exerted. So if you've overexerted yourself and you can't put maximal intent, you may be hindering the amount of adaptations you actually get from performing power training. So we talked about the what, why, when, but how do we actually train for power? So there's within training methods, resistance training, we need to build that base of our ability to produce force. So your primary movements, such as squat patterns, pull patterns, hinge patterns, and push patterns, these definitely make the meat and potatoes of your trainer. Next comes ballistic training, Olympic weightlifting, and plyometric training. These all tend to different parts of producing force. Olympic weightlifting, we're trying to produce force quickly with fairly heavy loads or moderate to heavy loads. And ballistic training is concentric force. So when you see people doing from deadstop positions like medicine ball throws overhead, chest passes against the wall, broad jumps from deadstop positions, squat jumps from a pause position, etc. And then plyometric training is a little bit more on the high velocity side of things. So our ability to basically react to the ground as quickly as possible and get off that ground as quickly as possible. A little bit more relatable to top end speed training. Aside from training methods, during the actual session, we're looking to implement two things. We want to bring maximal intent because we know that bringing maximal intent elicits the greatest adaptation from our power training. Whether that's ball, barbell, body weight, we want to try and move it as quickly and as forcefully as possible. Alongside moving with intent, we need to take control of our rest periods. As we mentioned previously, we're looking for our most maximal output as possible. So the ATP-CP system, or the adenosine triphosphate creatine phosphate system, is responsible for maximal outputs, and these last around 6 to 10 seconds, so similar to the sports that we spoke about previously. These require rest of upwards of 3 minutes plus needed to perform another high quality output effort. So relating back to this here, we're not fully rested. We might not get the most out of our power training due to the introduction of maybe fatigue, tiredness, and not being able to produce and move with intent. All in all, what we're wholly looking to do is try and include little bits of each training within our training program. A little bit of research from Storm, we looked into include both resistance and power training within the programs, and this made the most out of performance increases compared to isolating these physical qualities alone. So keep resistance training, keep power training, look to maximize your rest periods, look to move at maximal intent. Hopefully you learned a little bit from this presentation, and we will catch you in the next one.